Alright, we're streaming live again. Hopefully, we got all the problems sorted out. For those of you just tuning in, that dude there is Gylve or Björnsson, and he can yell at me if I mispronounce his name.
Well, you didn't, so I shan't.
Okay, you can still yell at me if you like. I'm sure we can find. I'm sure we can find some topic about which you can reasonably yell. Now, with that said, I would ask that you would kindly, and probably from the beginning, due to the due to the poor nature of our previous connection, if we would jump right in and read, or if you would jump right in and begin reading the first article, the one by the Federalist. The only weakness of the Golden State Warriors is
I'll
their
try
strength.
with my crooked English.
Ah, see, you have an excuse. You get to be the tall, blonde, and handsome dude reading with a lovely accent, and then all the ladies, every single two in the history of the world that watch this stream, will love you.
Of course. Oh. Well, yeah. So, the only weakness of the Golden State Warriors is their strength. Despite their abundance of talent, or maybe because of it, the Warriors seem prone to self-inflicted wounds. Ben Franklin definitely did not envision basketball playoffs when inventing his famous proverb about fish and guests. But his axiom, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, damn. But his axiom applied to this year's NBA Finals. The Golden State Warriors' 4-0 sweep of the Cleveland Cavaliers could lead one to believe the championship rematches spoiled after 3 series. While 2 of the 4 games appeared close for a time, the series' outcome never seemed in doubt after the initial match. In an event that will go down in finals infamy, Cavaliers guard J.R. Smith retrieved his teammate's missed free throw with seconds remaining in a tie game. Did nothing. Thinking the Cavaliers ahead, he dribbled out the final few seconds, sending the game to overtime, and then the Warriors dominated. Having failed in their attempt to steal a game on Golden State's home turf, the Cavaliers never had a better chance to shift the series in their favor. Instead, the next 3 games seemed like a journey to a preordinated conclusion. The Warriors' 3rd championship in 4 seasons. A new dynasty. Since June 2015, Stephen Curry and the Warriors have played LeBron James and the Cavaliers in 22 NBA Finals games. Having attended the first of these games in 2015, I could not have predicted the twists and turns that this rivalry would take over the course of those 4 years and 21 subsequent contests. I grew fond of the Warriors during the 2014 to 15 season through their distinct style of basketball. While Pelé popularized the term the beautiful game to describe soccer, the Warriors themselves play a beautiful, almost artistic style of basketball. Their offense becomes a ballet of motion, a whirling dervish of activity, both the ball itself and the players moving with and without the ball. Golden State's brand of basketball quickly revolutionized the NBA. The Warriors put a premium on free-flowing offense, aiming to average at least 300 to 320 passes per game, or an average about 3 per offensive possession, actually. Golden State's also used analytics to recognize the value of the 3-point shot and help build their team around it. In 2014 to 15, Golden State's new look basketball got them to a league best 66-16 record and their first NBA title in 4 decades. Curry and Klay Thompson, the Splash Brothers, used their sharpshooting skills, fluid offense, and tenacious defense to win a championship, turned the Warriors into a global marketing phenomenon. And yet, 3 years on from completing their Cinderella rise to their first championship, the Warriors face 2 seemingly contradictory problems. They're too good. On July 4th, 2016, a friend of mine used an apt wrestling metaphor to describe the news that shook the basketball world. The Warriors have turned heel. Coming off a 73-win season, the most regular season wins in NBA history, Golden State successfully pursued free agent Kevin Durant, an imposing 7 foot forward with a freakish combination of height and shooting ability.
So this dude is what 16 centimeters taller than you.
Just about, yeah. The signing came after an unusual one-in-a-million chain of events. After their 73-win regular season, Golden State gave up a 3-1 lead to Cleveland in the NBA Finals. In Game 7, played on Golden State home court, LeBron James came up with a clutch blocked shot, and guard Kyrie Irving made a three-pointer on that arguably changed the course of basketball history, that allowed the Cavaliers to win the final 3 games and James to bring Cleveland its first championship in any sport since 1964. But many casual basketball fans forgot that Cavaliers to win the final 3 games and James before Golden State lost a 3-1 lead in the 2016 NBA Finals. The Warriors had come back from a 3-1 lead against the Oklahoma City Thunder to make it back to the championship series. Long, lanky players like George Adams, Serge Ibaka, and Kevin Durant, then playing for the Thunder, wreaked havoc with shots taken by shorter guards like Thompson and Curry. Only a shooting barrage by Thompson in the fourth quarter of Game 6 allowed Golden State to escape Oklahoma City and force a Game 7, which the Warriors won on their home court to advance the NBA Finals. Following those 2 series, the Warriors looked longingly for a player with size and reach who could work in a fluid offense. Durant, meanwhile, admired the Warriors' selfless style of basketball, focused on motion and passing rather than one-on-one isolation plays. Durant received taunts and criticism for joining an arch-rival that had just defeated his team, but signed with the Warriors anyway. For Durant and the Warriors, it was a match made in heaven, but the 29 other NBA teams likely did not see it so kindly. Between Durant, Curry, Thompson, and versatile forward Draymond Green, the Warriors now start 4 All-Stars. Andre Iguodala, a 5th starter, only won NBA Finals MVP honors in the Warriors' 2015 win. With three of the league's best scorers in Curry, Thompson, and Durant, the Warriors have now won back-to-back titles since Durant joined the team. 2 games from this year's finals demonstrate the seemingly unstoppable nature of Golden State's offensive juggernaut. In Game 1, LeBron James had 51 points, the 6th highest total in NBA Finals history, and the Cavaliers had nearly 5 times as many offensive rebounds, 19, as the Warriors' 4. Yet the Warriors still found a way to win. In Game 3, Steph Curry shot only 1 for 10 from 3-point range, and he and Thompson shot a combined 7 for 27, 25.9%. Yet the Warriors still found a way to win because Durant scored 43 points, including 6 for 9 on 3-pointers, and pulled down 13 rebounds to go with it. The Warriors simply had too many weapons and too much talent for the Cavaliers, and for the rest of the NBA. And they're not good enough. Despite their abundance of talent, or maybe because of it, the Warriors seem prone to self-inflicted wounds. As one article from January notes, the Warriors' trouble with turnovers is no new issue. The team has had several lapses into sloppy play, marked with errant behind-the-back attempts and nonchalant entry passes. Then there are the fouls. Draymond Green, the Warriors' worst offender, frequently gets technical fouls. His suspension from the critical Game 5 of the 2016 NBA Finals arguably enabled Cleveland's epic comeback that year. But other Warriors caused their team problems as well. After getting ejected for arguing a foul call in a January contest, Durant admitted that he was being an a-hole. Or can I say asshole here?
We'll just say a-hole.
That he was being an a-hole, I was being a jerk. The Warriors' overabundance of talent may give them an entitled mentality, one that leads to sloppy play and their presumption that they will receive the benefit of calls from officials. These traits nearly came back to haunt the Warriors and arguably should have cost them a championship in the Western Conference Finals against the Houston Rockets. Turnovers and a stagnant offense that lacked the Warriors' usual fluidity and passing led the Rockets to take a 3-2 series lead. Only come from behind wins in both Games 6 and 7 allowed the Warriors to return to the finals. Had Rockets All-Star guard Chris Paul not stepped up the last 2 games due to a hamstring injury suffered late in Houston's Game 5 triumph, the Rockets and not the Warriors likely could have won this year's NBA championship. Realizing full potential. The Warriors' sweep of the Cavaliers may lead some to criticize LeBron James for failing to come through on the NBA's biggest stage. But in reality, James himself did his usual best, averaging 34 points over the course of the series and leading his team in points and assists in each of the 4 final games. Fortunately for the Cavaliers, the offseason trade of Irving to the Boston Celtics meant that LeBron James had arguably the weakest supporting cast of any team he took to the finals. That he took the team on his back to make it there at all represents perhaps the biggest achievement of his career, notwithstanding the sweep in the championship. But it did not come without cost. James admitted to being exhausted after a 7-game series in the first round, and following the Cavaliers' victory in the Eastern Conference Finals, James spent most of his trophy presentation laying on his back after a second grueling Game 7 this postseason. Ironically, the outcome in this year's finals may stand in contrast to the exertions made by both sides. The defeated LeBron James outperformed his talent, while the champion Golden State Warriors have, if not squandered, not fully, or at least not consistently, utilized all of theirs. With Curry, Thompson, Durant, and Green all having years to go in the prime of their careers, that represents a scary thought for the rest of the league to ponder this offseason, as 29 other teams try to compete with the NBA's emerging dynasty. So yeah, sorry for the mispronunciations here and there.
Ah, well. I kind of put you on the spot, didn't I? I was in the process of trying to make the stream actually work, so thank you very much for picking up the slack.
It was kind of fun after a decade of never doing it.
Ah! Well, it's closer to 2.
What?
Closer to 2. I'm unless, of course, in your early childhood days you were into streaming.
Oh, I meant the reading aloud.
Ah. And in a foreign language, no less.
No less, yeah.
So,
will it crash this time?
Well, this article touches on a phenomenon that I've noticed happens a lot amongst people that have it all together. Often their worst enemy is themselves. Often, if one is to perform poorly, it's one's own poor performance amidst high expectations that can cause one's downfall if the downfall is going to come at all.
I know this has happened a lot in chess too, with this phenomenon at least.
Oh, please, do tell.
Well, it's nothing much to tell, but for example, this guy I was playing in a chess tournament yesterday, 1800 player, really good player. I play at 1200 level, and he had won every game up to me, and then he comes and I mate him like completely luckily, and he's like, yeah, that happens when you think you're too good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I notice that happens a lot with. I know Grandmaster actually had the same problem when faced with the national championships. He did not. He did not win due to thinking himself better than all his opposition, which made him be surprised when this 14-year-old managed to beat him, or at least play good enough, and then he got shot, and then But yeah, sorry.
No reason to apologize. This actually, this makes an important point that I would like to caution anybody who's going for high performance is the expectations of others need not enter your mind when you're planning your training, or even when you're performing, because as soon as you wind up making your performance somehow contingent upon other people, and the more that you do make your performance contingent upon other people, the more control you take from your own grasp and put into the hands of others, and the less you feel responsible for your own destiny. If you feel like you've already won something, and that entitles you to a free pass, or to make mistakes, or to not be mentally present, then either you're not doing something challenging enough, or you need to reconsider your standards and aim higher. And even if, for example, a half-hearted attempt would already put you at being the best in the world, well, then maybe being the best in the world shouldn't be your goal, but being the best that you possibly can be should. And that way, whether you are the best in the world or whether you're not, you're going to be measuring yourself up to the standard, the only standard that you can consistently have a grasp of knowing whether or not you measured up. Because we deep down know when we gave it our all and when we didn't. And I have to say that this is something that what's it that they say? We preach best that which we need to learn most. I, for many years of my life, have been complacent in many aspects. And part of it's because it's easier to be complacent. Another reason is because when you're in the middle of doing something, and there exists the real possibility of both success and of failure, sometimes it's easier to hold back a little bit, almost so that if you do fail, there's an excuse that I wasn't giving it all, so even if other people are disappointed in my failure, I can assuage myself by knowing that I still had some left in the tank. And ultimately, that's no way to live, because there's something left unspent. There's something left ungiven. And especially if you're producing something of value to your fellow man, well, it's not particularly caring of anybody else if you're just slacking off and giving a half-hearted attempt at something. And whether you're giving a half-hearted attempt at basketball and still managing on winning games, but only scraping by, or whether you're giving a half-hearted attempt at school and still managing to get all A's, but not actually learning anything or developing yourself as a person, or giving a half-hearted attempt in whatever it happens to be, that's just not good.
It reminds me of a quote from a CrossFit athlete in the World Championship a couple of years ago. Which was, she said that she was in the interview after she won the thing. She said the only thought she consciously had to repeat in her thought was, "Give it your all. You won't have any use for this energy when you're done, anyways."
And interestingly, or at least one of the biggest energies that you have to give is your mental energy. I would say far more than your physical energy. Because if you're giving your mental energy, your mental energy takes an awful lot of glucose. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of concerted willpower to give. And of course there are ways that you can maximize your ability of giving this. But then there's also, the element of just how badly do you want this? How much does this actually matter to you? And so that also would cause one to perhaps think a little bit about, well, is what I'm doing actually significant enough for me to care? And if it's not, well, then maybe that means a little bit of rethinking of one's life would be in order. So, when it comes to, for instance, your chess playing, how do you go? How do you go about learning chess?
You play it.
And why are you doing chess?
Huh. That's a very good question. Well, I'm doing it for stimulation, I guess.
Okay.
Something to put my mind to.
What about it is stimulating?
Well, you have to plan. You have to consider. You have to actually think about what will he do if I do this, and do that for quite a while. Actually, mentally focus on what one is to do.
Mm-hmm. And let's say you're playing a long game. Let's say you're playing, I don't know, 120 minutes for 40 moves, and then an additional 120 minutes for the rest of the game. You're playing one of those games.
Mm-hmm.
Just one of those games where you can be sitting and contemplating a single move for multiple tens of minutes, especially in a crucial situation. One of those games where focus is important, but it's very much something that needs to be rationed. How how does it feel to go into one of those games?
Well, that obviously depends on the days leading up, but quite meditative in a way. I feel like, well, I don't know how to describe it really. It's just me and my inner voice sort of talking about what will he do, what won't he do. That didn't sound right.
And
So,
then when you get to that point of having multiple moves ahead in your mind, at least I found that when I play games like that, if I'm not focused, I can't calculate. I completely lose my ability to think moves ahead and see all the contingencies. And I will. Before continuing on to our planned next step, you wrote an answer. You wrote an answer on the subject of chess. What are your favorite chess books and why?
yeah, I did write that.
Okay.
Let's see if I can find it here. But there we are. Yeah.
So, what are your favorite chess books and why? And you said The Soviet Chess Primer by Ilya Mysalis. And you had the nice picture of the book. This is one hell of a book. If you go through all the examples in this book without being at a 1700 level at the end, you've done something wrong. This is one of the books that needs a huge amount of creativity and ingenuity to solve the problems, or puzzles. The introduction to the book mentions a guy who studied this book diligently for about 3 months. He went up like a crazy amount. This book is as complicated as it is simple. It has simple solutions, but you need incredible skills to solve them. This is by far the best chess book I have. And I actually went after reading this answer, because I know you had recommended it to me before, but I kept on forgetting which one it was. Now that I had it there staring me in the face, I went and got myself a copy. And I can say it's nuts in terms of how much it requires of you. mean, I skipped over the part of how you play the game because I've been playing, but I've never actually made a concerted effort to get good at it. Or rather, I've made some sporadic efforts after getting to know you, just because I want to be able to beat you, and I can't stand getting beaten by you.
Well, fair enough.
So you are motivating me to learn, and whether or not it's taking this book, for example, and reading it, or taking a training software that you recommend and using it, I've decided that I'm going to consistently apply myself to the game a little bit, but actually for the purpose of becoming more proficient at the game, and hopefully giving my thinking skills an edge.
Sounds like a good goal. But might I interject a comment to your previous mention about skipping the how to play the game?
What?
The thing about that chapter is you don't need to read it, but I would highly recommend doing the puzzles, because they're sort of good insights to have. Actually, I found good use of them.
Okay. So did I make a boo boo in terms of rejecting certain things and perhaps being too arrogant?
Oh no boo boo. Sorry, no boo boo. Just I did the same when I got it, but I was like, shit, I can't get through these puzzles right now. Let's start from the start. I actually found some useful concepts just in those simplistic puzzles as to how to actually think about these kinds of situations that are depicted. So no boo boo, just highly recommended.
Well, I guess I know what I'm going to be doing. But yes, from the little bit that I've used this book, it's incredibly good.
Oh yeah.
I can totally see why this would be your favorite. I have
Bless you.
I have the one by Polgar, by Laszlo Polgar, the
father.
No, 5,334. Was it puzzles?
Yeah.
And whereas that's very, very good in terms of it making you think, and taking you through a progressively more difficult puzzles. This one happens to. It's constructed in such a good way for teaching somebody. And in one of the introductory pages, they were saying, well, this is not good for children, but there's different kinds of books for children. Well, I would highly recommend this for any children that want to learn. I don't care what the one guy says, as long as the child actually wants to learn this stuff and has a good reason, he'll tolerate whatever kind of book it is that contains the information that he wants to know.
I agree. As evident from several real-life examples.
Well, you have quite the veritable library, don't you?
Yeah, quite varied in terms of topics, ages, in that regard.
All right.
So I guess everything through chess to medicine to biology, chemistry. The study of corpses.
Oh yes.
Let's see. What are some of the news? Biographies, social politics, physics, science, urology. It's just the ones I have at my table right now. So yeah. And of course, a lot of classical novels.
Ah. Ha! Excellent. I was able to go and change all the basic info of the stream so that now I'm not, saying that you're Steven Stutz anymore.
Great.
So
But-
hopefully you don't mind undergoing a name change during the stream.
Oh, no. But, I what's the... Sorry, I can't speak today. I'm a tad tired at the moment.
Ah. I'm assuming you didn't get any sleep then beforehand.
Well, I slept until 3 p.m., so I guess that should be good enough. But
Okay.
my circadian rhythm is basically busting in.
Oh, fun. Oh, fun.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's...
But yeah, I don't mind being Steven Stutz.
Well, I mind you being Steven Stutz, because if I were streaming with Steven Stutz, the nature of this would be very different than streaming with you. You are you. And I value you for you.
Well, thanks. Well, then there's one of us.
Well, here is this horrible piece. When police officers mistake autism for suspicious behavior.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
It's the second link in the description of,
Yeah,
of the
I have it
video.
open.
Law enforcement's encounters with people on the spectrum often go wrong. Some police departments are trying to change that. I mean, it's... you know, there are other titles for this that would work. Like, see, I don't even know how to respond to this, because on one sense you could say train them better, let them learn to distinguish an autistic person from a suspicious person. But you know, on another level, I think that's just a part of life, and then any officer that can't do that should just get canned.
Well, yeah.
It's like, how stupid do you have to be in order to not recognize an autistic person? I mean, this article infuriated me. This completely infuriated me. It begins. Johanna Verburg admits she wasn't on her best behavior the day she was arrested. It was a chilly morning in March in Sheffield, Alabama, near where Verburg lives. She was waiting for her 11-year-old daughter to finish a therapy session when she got into an argument with another woman in the waiting area of the therapist's office. As the argument escalated, the office manager called the police. Because that's, of course, what you do when an argument escalates. You call the police. Verburg, 41, had been diagnosed with autism a month earlier. As a nurse practitioner, she was familiar with the condition and recognized she has some autism traits. When she's nervous, for example, she stretches her fingers, cracks her jaw, plays with her rings, a form of stimming or self-stimulation that keeps her calm. And when she's around authority figures such as the police, she says she starts shutting down and has trouble communicating. When the officers arrived and followed her out of the therapist's office, she paused on the sidewalk to write a note to her daughter. She thought it would be reasonable to leave a note about why she'd left, but the police shouted at her to keep moving. Verburg says, "I said, okay, I have autism spectrum disorder. I do not understand what you're saying. I need you to explain that to me." The next thing she remembers is one of the officers pulling her arms behind her back and putting the handcuffs on her wrists. He became exponentially more aggressive the moment I identified as autistic, which startled me, she says. The police report does not state that she disclosed her diagnosis. Of course not. Verburg says she recalls the officer saying, "I'm done explaining anything, we're going in." Okay, so this is the part where I will straight off admit that, okay, I don't have all the facts.
course.
But and there are multiple explanations for why that would not appear in the report of the officer. Either A, it did not happen, or B, it did happen and they were ashamed of it. But given what I know about people interacting with autistic people, this sounds completely, well, not reasonable. It sounds like something that would happen. It's very unreasonable behavior. It's very stupid, very childish, very ill-mannered, very disrespectful. It shows a complete lack of care and understanding, and frankly, anybody that treats an autistic person like that, I think, should be, like, paraded naked through the streets with a tattoo on their back that says, "I'm an asshole." But, you know, I don't know if anyone learns anything, but there is a proverb that says something along the lines of a bit for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the back of the fool. Well, you know, you just use that rod on the back of the people that don't know what they're doing a few times, and maybe they'll learn. Maybe they won't, and then you can use the rod a little more. At least you'll get some of your sadistic, some of your sadism used. At least some of my sadism. But going back on this is, if this allegation is true, this is completely unreasonable behavior, and it's more than unreasonable. It's inhumane. There are certain ways that you treat human beings and certain ways that you don't, especially human beings that aren't in the process of committing a crime, aren't hurting anybody, but you know, you wind up giving an educated ape a gun and a set of handcuffs and so on, and they can do all sorts of harm. And yes, I'm going to say that lots of people in that particular profession, lots of them are good, but lots of them don't even belong there. And certainly, the media does report on unusual cases, because if they were usual, they wouldn't be newsworthy. That'd just be, oh, that's the normal way of things. But, at bare minimum, the police could at least demonstrate to the public the steps that they're taking to ensure these sorts of things don't occur, but generally they're not subject to too much oversight, which I think is kind of a disgrace, given that they're there for the purpose, or at least ostensibly for the purpose, of protecting and serving the public. But anyhow, enough of that rant. I'll continue reading. Connor Leibel's near arrest in July 2017, which was widely publicized in the US media, also escalated within a matter of minutes. Connor, who was 14 at the time, has autism and the intellectual ability of a 6-year-old, so he's a low-functioning autistic boy. He was flicking and staring at a piece of string when a police officer approached him in a park in Buckeye, Arizona. A few minutes later, a family friend looking after Connor that day returned to the park to find the officer holding down the teenager's lanky frame on the ground. In footage captured by the officer's body camera, Connor tells the officer he's stimming, but later the officer tells the family friend he thinks Connor has taken drugs. Connor was not charged, but he left the scene bruised and bleeding with an ankle injury that required surgery 6 months later, his parents say. The Buckeye Police Department declined to comment on the incident. To which I say, of course they declined to comment on the incident. Because there's a tendency amongst people in a given profession to stand up for those with ill will and horrible actions, because they can't deal with the cognitive dissonance or the fact that one of their own is a poop head. And just letting all the viewers know, it's not that I have anything particularly against police officers in their role. I think that the role of having an officer for the purpose of, for instance, keeping the peace and and of preventing people and taking care of people that aggressively violate the rights of others and so on is necessary. But someone flicking the end of a piece of string isn't doing anybody any harm, and sounds like there's some overzealous person who lets the little bit of authority that he gets with a badge go to his head. Which reminds me of the dastardly Stanford prison experiment under the supervision of Phil Zimbardo, which was a case in which subjects were randomly given the role of prisoner or prison guard, and the experiment needed to be cut short because the prison guards immediately went and turned abusive. And these were completely sane people, normal people, and they easily went and behaved in ways that were comparable to what, for instance, guards at Nazi prison camps behaved. So, if the institutions won't take care of such behavior, if the police academies and each respective police office doesn't take care of that, well, that just shows that they're negligent in their duty. Either that, or maybe their duty isn't actually to the citizen. Maybe that's actually not what they think that they're doing, which means that the entire situation needs to be rethought a bit. Anyhow, I'm sorry, I'm a little angry just by reading this. Even though I emotionally processed it the previous time, this is a much more tempered look at the subject than I had the original time I read this article. An encounter with the police also turned violent for Reginald Lotson, a young man with autism in Stafford County, Virginia. In May 2010, Lotson, then 18, was waiting for the public library to open when a staff member at a neighboring elementary school called the police and reported that a crossing guard had spotted a young black man with a gun. Because, of course, being young is a problem, being black is a problem, having a gun is a problem. Even though there's nothing about him having a gun. When the responding police officer found Lotson nearby and asked him to identify himself, Lotson did not give his name. Lotson fought with the officer and injured him, though it's unclear how the fight began. Lotson was convicted of assault among other charges and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The police never found a gun. So, the question is, okay, will you call that, So there you have a conflation of problems. A racist prick calls the police. Please pardon my language. Then the police responds in a horrible way. Identify yourself! Identify yourself! Identify yourself! Identify yourself! Just kind of like an ape that doesn't know how to, use their words. Identify yourself! Identify yourself! And then if you approach someone in a threatening manner, which I know that someone would be if you don't identify yourself and the police somehow thinks that you're beholden to him to identify yourself. Then somebody who has, a high latent threat response will rightly perceive that he is in danger.
Of course.
No, I'm not aware of the laws in Virginia, whether or not that's a state in which you must identify yourself, or in which you can refuse to answer said question. Because in the United States, this varies based upon the state. Nevertheless, that's just not how the situation's supposed to turn out. but such is the situation when lunkheads with badges meet autists. Would you please continue with reading the thing that begins these stories I'll highlight?
Yes, I can.
Thank
These
you.
stories.
I need to get a grip on myself.
These stories all highlight a central predicament for people with autism. Some of the condition's traits, from social anxiety and stimming to trouble with language and making eye contact, can resemble a police officer's standard profile for a suspicious person. Add flashing lights, a shrill siren, or the blare of a bullhorn, and it can be paralyzing for someone with autism who may have extreme sensitivity to light, sound, or touch. In the United States, many large police departments offer some form of training to help officers recognize and be sensitive to these differences. In many of those departments, however, the training is not mandated, and it doesn't seem to be much better in other countries. A 2016 survey of 394 police officers in England and Wales found that only 37% had received any autism-specific training. Just how frequently interactions between police and people with autism takes place or turn violent is unknown. Few experts track rates of encounters, arrests, or imprisonment of people with autism. In general, Americans with a disability are more likely to be arrested than those without, and anecdotal evidence suggests that for people with autism this is a serious problem regardless of race, gender, age, or socioeconomic status or autism severity. As in the general public, men on the spectrum who are Black or Latino and those who have a history of aggression may be particularly at risk of encounters with the police. Even without statistics, though, the need for better training is clear, both to coach police on how to modify their approach for people with autism, and to teach people with autism how to respond and cope in these situations. Most of the intervention thinking comes from the standpoint of what do we need to do to police to educate them about autism, says Paul Shatak, the director of Life Course Outcomes Program at the A.J. Drexel Autism Institute in Philadelphia. I think the other direction is important too. In the wake of several highly publicized cases of police brutality over the past decade, data scientists and media organizations have led efforts to make law enforcement more transparent. Despite this increased scrutiny, statistics on incidents specifically involving people with autism are nearly impossible to come by. Spectrum queried, is that right?
Queried, yes.
Queried more than 30 of the largest law enforcement departments in the United States about their reporting practices. Of the 18 that responded, none tracked those numbers. Without that information, little is known about where, how often, or why people with autism come into contact with police.
Well, Caleb said, I know autistics who get the cops called on them regularly. Apparently something about their off mannerisms makes people call the fuzz. The Milgram experiment illustrates this point as well. Yeah, that so someone thinks that they're allowed to escalate a situation just because they're not having somebody essentially kowtowing before their authority.
Rick, that doesn't sound good.
Ah, yes, the point about the Stanford prison experiment with the Milgram thing. Well, I was also thinking about, people being trained to escalate the situation bit by bit by bit. Going from ask to tell to, I don't know, tase or use force or
lethal
beat up, lethal force. Just going through the system of, yeah, there are certain places they have to tread lightly. Everywhere in public.
Well, yeah. So I'm gonna continue.
Please do. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I just wanted to have Caleb's thing go. Yeah, please do go ahead.
In 2014, Juliana Reva set out to find some answers. Starting when she was a graduate student at Drexel University, she and her colleagues probed the National Special Education database that surveys young people and their parents on a number of topics, including police interactions. When we did the literature review, there was no nationally representative samples of this, says Rob, now a health science policy analyst for the National Institute of Mental Health's Office of Autism Research Coordination. And I thought, no matter what, this could be my contribution to this topic. Her findings, published in February 2017, show that nearly 20% of young people on the spectrum have had a run-in with the police by age 21, and about half of those by age 15. About 5% are arrested by the time they're 21, but because there are no long-term data, there's no way to tell whether these statistics are on the rise or declining, and how they might compare with numbers for the general population. It's very hard to get a straight yes or no, that they're higher than in the general population, Reva says. But I think the biggest highlight from my article is individuals with autism are being stopped often. She and others have identified several factors that increase the odds of an individual with autism being stopped by the police. Boys and young men with autism are more likely to have police encounters than are girls and young women with the condition. Those who have difficulty controlling their temper are also more likely to have police contact, according to a small Canadian study of people with autism. Another analysis published in November found that young people with autism who have visited or been admitted to a hospital for serious psychiatric problems have a 9-fold increased risk of a police encounter. That same survey also found that young people with autism from families with an income of less than $79,000 a year have double the risk of police contact as those from higher income families. Race didn't turn up as a factor in Reva's study, but it seems like a no-brainer, says Shatak, one of Reva's former advisors. Conservative and say we don't have data about that in the world of autism, he says. But come on, how much data do we need? Parents of young people with autism have come to the same conclusion. Rachel Harvey, the mother of Ethan, 20, says she has coached her son to follow orders should he ever meet a police officer, because he's already a black man, he's already got that one thing going against him, says Harvey, who lives with her son in Collingswood, New Jersey, a town she described as diverse with a good small-town feel. That sense of community Asperger's is how do you pronounce that?
Asperger's. Was it not?
What?
Was it? I'm sorry. I'm in the process of writing to Caleb.
Yes.
Where are we?
We are that sense of community. Basically, just under halfway through.
That sense of community assuages her fears.
The sense of community assuages her fears that Evan will be mistaken for a criminal, she says, but she can't completely erase her concern that one day he won't make it home from his night shift working at McDonald's. Families of young people with autism also worry about misleading reports in the press that link autism diagnoses, such as those given to mass shooters Adam Lance and Nicholas Cruz, with violent acts, and the potential bias those reports might create. In fact, there is no evidence to suggest that autism predisposes someone to violent behavior, says Matthew Lerner, an assistant professor of clinical psychology at Stony Brook University in New York. In 2012, Lerner and his colleagues described a perfect storm of autism traits, social difficulties, trouble regulating emotions, and impairments in theory of mind, or the ability to understand others' mental states, that could hypothetically lead to isolation, impulsivity, and possibly violence. But that same mix might also propel a typical person to violence, and there's little research on how such a maelstrom of feelings plays out in the real world. In January 2014, Lerner appeared before the Sandy Hook Advisory Commission, convened to make recommendations to prevent murders like the ones Lance committed in 2012 in Newton, Connecticut. There were essentially a day in the Sandy Hook Commission where they were trying to understand, does Lance's autism play a role? Lerner says. He testified that in most cases having autism would certainly not make anyone more or less prone to violence. Some experts question whether most people with autism are even culpable in instances where they do commit crimes. If they have autism, it affects every aspect of their life, including the ability to judge right from wrong, says Gary Messibab, the former director of the Teach Autism program at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Mill. Messibab has testified in criminal cases involving individuals with autism for about 5 years. It doesn't necessarily mean they shouldn't be guilty in the way it gets measured in court, he says, but it's a grey area and it's incredibly difficult. Johanna Verberg is on the mild end of the spectrum, and the officer might not have known about her condition if she had not disclosed it. On the other hand, anyone who talks with Connor Leibel can tell within seconds that he isn't neurotypical, but he has never been in trouble. His parents suspected something was wrong when he was a toddler. He walked on his toes and was delayed as he learned to speak. He lined up his yellow Lego bricks side by side instead of using them to build a structure. A clinician diagnosed him with autism when he was 2. Most nights around dinner time, Connor pulls his parents into chats about his day at school. He has made a number of friends in his special program for adolescents with autism. He wants to interact with other people, but his conversational skills are rudimentary, his mother says. After the incident in the park, the Leibels filed a formal complaint against the officer involved, but an internal police investigation cleared him of any wrongdoing. The report noted that the officer had not been trained in handling special needs people or mentally ill persons.
Okay, I'm going to pause this for a moment, just because interjecting in these situations is, well, at least I find it necessary. Not been trained in handling special needs people or mentally ill persons. Now please, do tell me, aside from being human, what training is actually necessary?
Almost none. Like, half an hour on a Wikipedia page, like, it's no great commitment. You just need to actually be aware that there exists people who deviate from social normalities.
Yeah, in many different aspects, and then also giving them the same respect that you do any other man or woman. You know, treat people like human beings. That's kind of yeah. But anyhow, please continue before I completely derail this.
Yeah, the Buckeye Police Department offers training, but the report says only certain officers in this department went to critical incident training due to a restricted number of available seats during
critical incident training? Critical incident? Yeah, it's really critical when you run into someone with autism.
Oh yeah. He'll stim you down. Oh my. But yeah, the libels say they are planning to sue the Buckeye Police Department for financial damages. Arizona does not require police training for interacting with people on the spectrum, neither does Alabama, where Verberg lives, but at least 3 other states, Florida, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, have mandated training for police or other first responders such as firefighters. Even so, a 2016 study found that in New Jersey, which passed its law in 2008, 23% of those agencies had not complied with the law. Potentially thousands of police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical services personnel who would respond to calls involving autistic individuals have not been trained to respond properly to these situations, the researcher concluded. Almost 50% of the responders who had received training said their training was only somewhat effective or not effective. Of the 18 large U.S. police departments that responded to Spectrum's queries, including some in Florida and New Jersey, 15 say they offer some form of autism-specific training, but these programs vary considerably. For instance, the New York City Police Department, which employs more than 34,000 uniformed officers, says every in-service officer receives training each year to help them recognize autism traits. In Harris County, Texas, which includes the city of Houston, roughly 2,500 sworn officers are required to attend a 1 to 3 hour presentation on signs of autism. The training also includes response strategies: be patient, speak calmly, and don't touch the person or stop their repetitive motions unless it's necessary for safety reasons. The representatives of 3 departments in New York, Georgia, and Arizona told Spectrum these tactics are woven into basic training or broader crisis intervention courses. The U.S. Department of Justice has compelled some city police to revise their autism training. For example, in 2012, the mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, asked the federal department to investigate its police officers' use of force. A 2015 settlement between the federal department and the Cleveland police mandated a suite of changes, including a 40-hour crisis intervention program with a unit on autism. Officers participate in a role-playing scenario to learn how to interact with people who have severe autism, says Captain James Purcell. The division's crisis intervention coordinator. We have a certain amount of buy-in from officers because there's quite a number of officers that have either autistic people in their family or autistic children, he says. But even this training is not enough, he says. You could put them in training for 6 months and they still might not get everything they need. Training for autism is particularly complicated because of the condition's heterogeneity. That sounds wrong. How do you pronounce that?
Yeah, you said it just right.
Oh. Well, yeah, training for autism is particularly complicated because of the condition's heterogeneity. We can't teach police well because you interacted or saw this video about this one person with this presentation of autism. Now you know autism and you'd be able to spot it anywhere, says Jona Lunsky, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto. Lunsky led the Canadian study linking aggression and police contacting people with autism. She says researchers need to continue to study these interactions and encourage police departments to be vigilant about training. There are small but encouraging steps toward greater understanding between police and the communities they serve. Last year, the state of Illinois introduced a free disability identification card for people 16 and older with autism or other conditions such as schizophrenia. The card is intended to alert police officers. The first responders understand that not everybody behaves in the same manner under a highly stressful situation, says Stephanie Kifowit, the state representative who sponsored the law that created the program. Many departments, including the one in Buckeye, have launched a voluntary registry for people with autism or other conditions. It's heartwarming because it gives you some kind of feeling that something good will come out of this, says Danielle Leibel, Connor's mother. She says things are slowly improving for Connor at home. She and her husband don't talk about the incident in front of their children anymore, and when Connor brings it up, they reiterate that most police officers are respectful and kind. She often reminds Connor to never hit or run away from an officer. Sometimes she pretends to be a police officer herself and surprises him with a stern, "Hey, what are you doing?" Most of the time, Connor responds just the way she's taught him to. My name is Connor, he says. I have autism.
Okay, this is good. This is good.
Oh, yeah.
Teaching your child to deal with, people that need to have conditioned responses, otherwise they go into panic mode and start throwing poo. You just have to keep them from throwing poo. Skinnerian conditioning and all that. Just go with their conditioning.
Yeah, and Verberg is less optimistic. After her arrest in March, she was charged with disorderly conduct and other offenses. She was held for 3 hours before being released and faces her first court date in June. Verberg has 8 children, 2 of whom are on the spectrum, and says she doesn't know what to tell them about interacting with the police. I honestly don't have an answer to that, she says. I haven't even begun to figure out how to move forward again, both personally and as a mother. Might I just say that this reminds me of the case with Joe Arady, I think. I think was his name. Who was, a mentally disabled 23-year-old who was falsely accused of rape and murder of a 15-year-old school girl in Colorado. He suffered extreme autism and was put on death row because he couldn't defend himself. This was about 1935, I think. So a long time ago. But I remember a quote from the the warden of the prison, that he was such a good boy, even sharing his toy train with the other inmates. He was, what's the term? Well, they discovered he wasn't the killer about 70 years afterwards, so about 2000, I think it was. For example.
Well, those things are just, they're mind-boggling to me as to how people treat certain things as, or certain traits as subhuman almost, but then complete and total idiocy and being easily having one's like mental faculties hijacked by emotion isn't viewed as, something that needs to be taken care of. I don't understand that, because ultimately I view all of these sorts of things as an assault on the dignity of a human being, and I don't mean assault in the legal definition of physically assaulting somebody, unless the physical assault actually does take place. But there is the element of human dignity that is, shall we say, philosophically under assault by these sorts of things, and then obviously practically due to the fact that we're not treating people as humans. That sort of a thing does tend to bother me a bit, but for those of our listeners who are on the spectrum, the best thing I can suggest is that counting on things changing is highly unlikely, because people will remain people, lunkheads will remain lunkheads, troglodytes will remain troglodytes, and you can't do too much other than learn to live with them and behave in accordance with their conditioning, and if at all possible, learn how to not make them feel unsafe, which is interesting, because I would say a lot of these things are occurring, or a lot of the problems are occurring on account of people not feeling safe. Either because an officer would be, for instance, racist and see a black person and think, okay, this person is dangerous, or because an officer would be, having a certain idea of normal interpersonal interaction, and then having a certain deviation therefrom make him feel uneasy, and then all these feelings of unease go and completely hijack the rational part. So, no matter what position you happen to be in, one of the most valuable life skills is helping those around you remain on an even emotional keel, and to feel safe, and to feel respected as people. If you do that, you're not going to run into as many problems with them as you might otherwise. Now, the caveat is, if it's a police officer, their idea of being respected might be that of being unequivocally obeyed. But there are still ways of influencing your own words, body posture, and mannerisms in ways to assuage other people. Remember, as I told you, they're not only are they conditioned to certain things, but the amygdala, for instance, picks up on certain visual cues, and responds differently. So, even if it isn't natural, picking up a book on body language and understanding it appropriately and acting in accordance with it, however unnatural it may feel at the time, has the potential of getting you out of a bad situation. And so that might be an investment that's worth making in your own future. I know I myself made that kind of an investment, and I'm not even technically autistic. What are you saying, Gylve?
Oh, I would just recommend the book on body language by Joe Navarro. It at least helped me to gain somewhat of a handle on social situations.
By Joe Navarro. Would you mind sending me that via WhatsApp sometime in between now and when I go and I put all the things in, and then I'll put the link into the description when I'm going and putting in all the timestamps and so on, waiting for the video to process.
Oh, I can do it right now, really.
Well, great.
It's a good book. It helped me to notice when I go too far in my conversations.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
Oh, yeah. That's useful.
Well, while you're doing that and finding the link, I will go on to our next piece.
Might I just... I have something.
Oh, you have something else to say? Okay.
No, I just want to head for the can before we continue, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I will just tell you a little bit about this next piece. It's a piece about someone who attended Jordan Peterson's show. And this person apparently didn't know too much about Peterson, except for that which had made him rather infamous. And it's interesting how one or two big events in people's lives generally shapes the way people see them, especially insofar as it fits into their own view of the world. Indeed, I would say that Jordan Peterson said that he was, to my understanding, the basis for all of this contention over Jordan Peterson is that he said he would not use gender pronouns just because the law mandated him to do so. Use of these gender pronouns, Z and Zer and so on, instead of he and her, or he, him and her, and he and she, and all these other ones. Oh, I lost track of my thought since Gylve so kindly rejoined us. Oh yes, Jordan Peterson said he would not use these terms because he didn't think it was right for government to compel speech. And then many other people, those that wanted to take offense at this, ultimately said, well, it's because you're not being compassionate, because you're not caring, because you actually have something against transgender people. Which is interesting in essentially protesting and denouncing what appears to be a government infringement upon free speech. Oh boy, I'm really having trouble speaking. So Jordan Peterson was essentially making a public proclamation condemning government overreach in the realm of free speech, in the realm of mandating people's speech, and having it turned into, well, you must be a hateful person if you refuse to jump through the hoops that the government gives you. Well, if you would already behave in certain ways that you think are respectful to other people, without the government telling you to do it, going out of your way to say, I'm not going to do this because the government says so. Whereas he very well may do so on an individual to individual basis out of his own volition, is completely, at least in my understanding, a fine thing to do that lots of people would, in fact, most sane people, I would say, oh, that's perfectly fine. But for people that want to essentially have government validating something, or are drastically afraid of being labeled as bigoted, they'll just go and push government control of this and government control of that, and they won't care if the government can control one's speech, as long as their speech is not being assaulted. So this whole issue around free speech caused a great amount of polarization around I would say ultimately the character of Jordan Peterson, meaning the character as what people see, almost like the character in a movie. And that also is due to the fact, predominantly, that certain people don't feel safe knowing that other people have the freedom to say what they want. You know, people oftentimes have grown up in an environment where every little slight, or even perceived slight, is perceived as a big affront and blown out of proportion. Whereas things that might actually be violations of human rights, as long as they haven't been taught, are of the same grave importance as the preservation of one's fifis, they'll be treated differently.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that caring about people's feelings is inherently bad, either. It's just saying that forcing the government, or the government forcing us to care about people's feelings at the expense of our human rights, might not necessarily be the best thing.
I might be a bit on the anti-government side, so I guess take this with a grain of salt. But I do agree that the government is, or the government, for that matter, trying to control way more than they should, and we should get rid of them soon. The anarchistic comment of the day.
Ah, okay. Well, one of the biggest things is if you remove something from somebody else, there needs to be something else that will fill in the void. Otherwise, people, as the proverbs say, a dog returneth to its own vomit. So you need to take the dog and then point them in a general other direction, and then have something good at the other end. Interestingly, there are some very intelligent people. The one that immediately comes to mind is Mr. Dennis Pratt on Quora, who articulates these sorts of positions very, very nicely. And if you're interested in looking more into what Gylve has said, check him out. I will also put his Quora profile into the description of this once it actually becomes a YouTube video.
And do read God and the State by Bakunin. Very good book on anarchism.
Okay.
I can send you the link for that too.
That would be great. So we'll get all these links squared away after the stream, or perhaps during the intermission. But anyhow, without further ado, meaning Juliana Knott, 3 things Juliana Knott learned from attending Jordan Peterson's sold-out show in DC. Peterson's message is one focused on finding meaning, not fueling hate. Although it's not a saving message, it's one we'll be hearing for a long time. Renowned psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson took the stage at the sold-out Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. Friday night. The crowd got on its feet and started cheering, ecstatic to hear him speak. Peterson gained fame after opposing a Canadian bill that criminalized using the wrong pronouns for transgender persons. His notoriety only grew from there after a video of his interview with British broadcaster Cathy Newman went viral. Now he's got a cult following who call themselves lobsters, in reference to an example in the viral interview, and a best-selling book titled 12 Rules for Life. To my recollection, this had something to do with just showing how the serotonin, the brain's response to serotonin is similar in lobsters and in human beings. But the physiological differences are so very well marked in lobsters, given that they're so much more simple. He just appropriated that example for use in his book. And then, of course, as people tend to latch onto things, people latched onto that. That night, Peterson worked through only 9 of the 12 rules, drawing from clinical psychology, philosophy, and common sense. Before he started walking through his rules, he talked about what motivated him. Earlier that day, he and Dave Rubin, a YouTube personality who opened the show and appeared on the Federalist Radio Hour last week, were at the Lincoln Memorial when a young man walked up to them. This man's brother had been going through a divorce when he started watching Peterson's lectures online. The advice Peterson gave helped turn his brother's life around. Peterson said these experiences were the highlight of what he did. It's personal, not political, he said. It's an important clarification because most of the coverage of Peterson has been only the latter. He's either a spokesman for alt-right hatred or the last defense against stifling political correctness. Yet Peterson is a clinical psychologist. According to him, his aim is to help people. Before attending this event, I had very little knowledge of Peterson and his views. I had seen clips of his famous interview and glanced at his 12 rules, but lacked an understanding of him and his work. Here are 3 things I learned about Jordan Peterson after attending his show. 1. Peterson is not an alt-right demagogue. Many on the left have criticized Peterson and his followers as disgruntled white men hiding their pent-up racism and sexism behind pseudo-intellectual talk. A columnist from The Nation states that Peterson has a far-right political agenda and advises her reader to avoid dating one of his fans. Peterson certainly doesn't play the alt-right type by wearing a 3-piece navy blue suit and drinking Perrier. Throughout his lecture, he paced the stage, not goose-stepped, and took frequent pauses in order to word his next thought carefully. This is not the demeanor of a brazen white nationalist. Neither was his message. He did not blame women or minorities for the problems in his followers' lives. Rather, it actually targeted his followers themselves. Peterson asked the crowd repeatedly, "If your life is truly miserable, are you actually doing all that you can to make it better?" He also has called for people to restrain themselves from violence and focus on managing themselves, rather than attempting to manipulate or bully others. Additionally, his rules called for vulnerability and personal suffering rather than blood and soil. His first rule is probably the best example of this. It states, "Stand up straight with your shoulders back." At first glance, one might pounce on this as a command to show the world who's boss. That is not the case. Peterson told the crowd to be open to the wounds of the world so they can experience its suffering and learn from it. His message does not seek to oppress or dehumanize. Rather, it seeks truth and meaning. 2. Peterson can help you help yourself, but not save you. Because Peterson is seeking out truth and meaning, he can't avoid questions of faith. In fact, he calls the propositions on which he bases his rules religious, because they're about the fundamental reality of life. His propositions are these. 1. Life is tragic. 2. The world's tragedy is touched with malevolence, because humans often make their suffering worse. 3. In order to contend with this suffering, one must have a noble goal to justify your existence, clear your conscience, and get yourself out of bed. most world religions contain the first two premises in some form. Even secular humanism acknowledges that the world is a broken place. Peterson noted that "you're perfectly okay the way you are" is the most pessimistic advice you can receive. If this is the best humanity can do, we will all start staring into the abyss very soon. In fact, our society has already done a good deal of that lately. Peterson's third conclusion doesn't meet his prior statement. He claims that he's become an optimist about the human condition because he's such a pessimist about the state of the world. The grandeur of the human spirit is enough to confront the worst pain that we face today, he says. These rules can repair and improve things like mindset, work ethic, and family life, which are very important things. However, they fall short in addressing the brokenness of the human soul. That's because, even at our best, we can't follow Peterson's 12 rules perfectly. Even if we could, we wouldn't be immune to senseless tragedies like death and illness. Our hurt stretches far deeper than his moral guidelines can reach. To be fair, I don't think Peterson believes that his 12 rules are the cure-all for the world's brokenness. However, for his many secular followers, this is the sole semblance of religion they have, so they are going to treat it as such. And 3. Peterson isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Natalie Wynn, a transgender person, responded to Peterson in a not safe for work video, admitting, "People have this need to have purpose in the face of suffering, and not just complain about patriarchy." Peterson recognizes that it is not enough to stand against bad ideology. People also need a positive belief system. Peterson engages the common YouTuber in questions of truth and meaning. He acknowledges and fills a gap in society. He doesn't show open disdain for people who haven't read Plato, but speaks to his crowds at their level, showing how complex philosophy has the potential to improve one's life. Peterson also engages with his fame well. He treats it with caution and doesn't revel in his spotlight. During the question and answer, he says he thinks his fame will end in catastrophe at any moment. This mindset gives his message endurance over the fleeting fame so many viral stars chase. It is unlikely he'll burn out like Milo Yiannopoulos, an actual provocateur. Peterson's tour is only halfway through, and his videos still rack up millions of views all over the internet. As I left the theater, I noticed that the woman sitting in the row in front of me wore lobster earrings. As I walked out, I saw a man who had donned a lobster hat, complete with antennae. He waved his red foam claw around and shouted that this was the best show he had ever been to. Peterson's message is one focused on finding meaning, not fueling hate. Although it's not a saving message, it's one we'll be hearing for a long time. So yeah, finding meaning, which is actually a very interesting topic that we could potentially discuss for a little while before continuing on to other subjects. What is it, Gylve, that you said that you considered yourself? It was
Optimistic nihilist.
Optimistic nihilist. I didn't know it was. I couldn't remember whether it was positive or optimistic. I wanted to make sure it would be your words and not mine.
Oh yeah, which is apparently quite the opposite. So I guess I should explain the concept since I'm basically being a bit quiet.
Oh, please do.
So yeah, nihilism is basically a variation of nihilism. Nihilism is believing that nothing has any inherent meaning and basically everything's going to shit because we're just random. We're just a byproduct. There's no meaning to this. So I guess my outlook, the optimistic part, is that since there is no inherent meaning, we can create our own, which then is meaning in itself. Is up to yourself to dictate. Has worked good thus far. Uh,
It's interesting because what it is you're describing is very similar to what is described in the book The Atheist's Way
oh yeah.
by I'm trying to think of who wrote it. Unfortunately, I'm having a little bit of a difficulty. A bit of difficulty finding it. By Eric Meisel. It's entitled "The Atheist's Way: Living Well Without Gods." By Eric Meisel, author of Creativity for Life. Well, this is interesting. So the chapter titles are: We have our traditions. We leave our churches, if we formerly believed. We make our own meaning. We invest meaning, another curious idea. We nominate ourselves as the heroes of our own stories. We get blue sometimes, who doesn't? We deal with meaninglessness, yes, by making meaning. We choose our meanings, or do they choose us? We make idiosyncratic meaning choices, as is our right and obligation. We maintain meaning, daily and over the long haul. We make our ethics as active moral philosophers. We stand firm even while consternated. In conclusion, we find life amazing exactly as it is. Would you say that that characterizes what you're saying? Partially, wholly, not at all?
I will say that it almost fits entirely, except the last point.
We find life amazing exactly as it is.
Well, I guess the last line of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the last line is parenthetical, so I don't know if that's meant to mean that it's supposedly obvious, or if it's included for the for the sake of having it sound a little nicer. We find life amazing, just exactly as it is. It's like,
Could I propose the
remember you're
meaning of?
special just the way you are, or something.
Could I propose the meaning of?
Please do.
Yeah, I was, but I suddenly found myself short of articulation. Or shit, I went totally blank right now. Yeah, like amazing, like fucking Christ. I must apologize. Sorry.
Well,
Like, sort of, it is amazing, but it isn't in a sense. It's we see it as amazing as it is, even though it might not be amazing at all.
I see.
I thought at least.
Huh. Well, on that note, I think that we should have a little bit of an intermission due to the fact that this has been a slightly more hectic stream than have previous streams been due to the technical difficulties there at the beginning. I'm going to suggest that we have, let's say, I'll set the timer for 8 minutes and suggest that we have an 8-minute intermission before we continue on with other subjects such as education. Does that work for you?
That works perfectly for me.
All right. Well, without further ado, then, we will go on to our intermission. Right, well, we're back.
Bro.
Let's see how many people left. All right.
Still going strong with 5.
Oh,
And
lovely.
one of them is me, though.
Okay. 5. That's interesting. It says... according to Stream Health... this is, quite interesting. Anyhow... I'm going to decrease the bandwidth used by my monitor stream, so that hopefully, when we go to our next stage of the stream, which is actually going to involve broadcasting some more video, I'm going to actually broadcast the 2 different videos that I put into the description, which are dangerous people are teaching your kids. And then, can everyone become talented? So, without further ado, I'm going to mute the pair of us and suggest that if you want to follow along, that you follow along with the PragerU video that I'm about ready to put up on screen now. Alright, the video is going to come on in 3, 2, 1.
You may not realize it, but you are currently funding some dangerous people. They are indoctrinating young minds throughout the West with their resentment-ridden ideology. They have made it their life's mission to undermine Western civilization itself, which they regard as corrupt, oppressive, and patriarchal. If you're a taxpayer, or paying for your kid's liberal arts degree, you're underwriting this gang of nihilists. You're supporting ideologues who claim that all truth is subjective, that all sex differences are socially constructed, and that Western imperialism is the sole source of all third world problems. They are the postmodernists, pushing progressive activism at a college near you. They produce the mobs that violently shut down campus speakers, the language police who enshrine into law use of fabricated gender pronouns, and the deans whose livelihoods depend on madly rooting out discrimination, where little or none exists. Their thinking took hold in Western universities in the 60s and 70s, when the true believers of the radical left became the professors of today. And now we rack up education-related debt, not so that our children learn to think critically, write clearly, or speak properly, but so they can model their mentor's destructive agenda. It's now possible to complete an English degree and never encounter Shakespeare, one of those dead white males whose works underlie our society of oppression. To understand and oppose the postmodernists, the ideas by which they orient themselves must be clearly identified. First is their new unholy trinity of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is defined not by opinion, but by race, ethnicity, or sexual identity. Equity is no longer the laudable goal of equality of opportunity, but the insistence on equality of outcome. And inclusion is the use of identity-based quotas to attain this misconceived state of equity. All the classic rights of the West are to be considered secondary to these new values. Take, for example, freedom of speech, the very pillar of democracy. The postmodernists refuse to believe that people of goodwill can exchange ideas and reach consensus. Their world is instead a Hobbesian nightmare of identity groups warring for power. They don't see ideas that run contrary to their ideology as simply incorrect. They see them as integral to the oppressive system they wish to supplant, and consider it a moral obligation to stifle and constrain their expression. Second is rejection of the free market, of the very idea that free voluntary trading benefits everyone. They won't acknowledge that capitalism has lifted up hundreds of millions of people, so they can, for the first time in history, afford food, shelter, clothing, transportation, even entertainment and travel. Those classified as poor in the US, and increasingly everywhere else, are able to meet their basic needs. Meanwhile, in once prosperous Venezuela, until recently the poster child of the campus radicals, the middle class lines up for toilet paper. Third and finally are the politics of identity. Postmodernists don't believe in individuals. You're an exemplar of your race, sex, or sexual preference. You're also either a victim or an oppressor. No wrong can be done by anyone in the former group, and no good by the latter. Such ideas of victimization do nothing but justify the use of power and engender intergroup conflict. All these concepts originated with Karl Marx, the 19th century German philosopher. Marx viewed the world as a gigantic class struggle, the bourgeoisie against the proletariat, the grasping rich against the desperate poor. But wherever his ideas were put into practice, in the Soviet Union, China, Vietnam, and Cambodia, to name just a few, whole economies failed and tens of millions were killed. We fought a decades-long Cold War to stop the spread of those murderous notions. But they're back, in the new guise of identity politics. The corrupt ideas of the postmodern neo-Marxists should be consigned to the dustbin of history. Instead, we underwrite their continuance in the very institutions where the central ideas of the West should be transmitted across the generations. Unless we stop, postmodernism will do to America and the entire Western world what it's already done to its universities. I'm Jordan Peterson, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Well then,
Right, well, here we are.
might I just ask,
Mm-hmm.
the English degree, they have to fucking encounter Shakespeare at some point.
No.
Melville?
Okay. Certainly in certain universities, people can still get, shall we say, some of the scraps of a classical education, but it's not necessarily found, and it's being found less and less.
That's depressing.
So, yeah, if you're a dead white male, that happens to have then obviously been in his time an oppressor, that immediately nullifies anything that you may have said or done. See, now we're live white males, so that actually makes us worse because we're doing our oppressing right now. and you're far worse because you're blonde.
Oh yeah, right.
Yes, and tall. So that means you have height privilege.
Of course.
as well. So like you there's nothing that you can do that's good.
No, of course, it's only natural.
So I'm almost as bad, but I'm short, so I have I'm a height victim, you see. And so you need to chop off your feet and mail them to me.
Of course.
Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. I can mail you the saw if you wish.
Please do.
Gladly. It's like that that scene from the movie Saw, actually.
I haven't seen those.
They're quite graphic, pretty horrific.
I've seen those. Not from the movie, but elsewhere.
Well, there's one particular scene where one person had to chop his leg off in order to escape shackles or be permanently buried alive. So just consider yourself doing that for the sake of not being ideologically buried alive by neo-Marxists.
I'm doing it for the greater good.
Exactly. You're sending me your feet for the greater good, and then I'm going to find some way of getting them transplanted.
But like, seriously though, not encountering Shakespeare or any other great author in an English degree, that's... And people wonder why I go culinary school.
Well, at least you're going to be receiving in culinary school the rudiments of a valuable trade.
Oh yeah. Instead of a worthless degree.
Yes, which is interesting because if I may bring up what you and Caleb are doing, is it all right for me to mention the arrangement that the pair of you have?
Please do.
Okay, so this dude here is interested in philosophia. This dude is interested in learning philosophy and has apparently, at least according to the best of my knowledge, successfully petitioned Caleb to teach him. And he will be showing up on Friday night parlors and so on, as well as Caleb will be giving him homework and just throwing all sorts of material and having intelligent conversations and all these joyful things that would have at one point occurred at a university. And in so doing, Gylve is going to get a great part of classical education, and so is Caleb too, because anytime that good minds throw ideas back and forth, education takes place. And they're not going to be spending a penny other than that which is spent on internet connection, and then of course the opportunity cost spent by spending their time on doing that rather than pursuing something else. But I think that having a great deal of time devoted to thinking about philosophy is a pretty good use of one's time. Especially given that you are going to be in the process of producing all sorts of value for other people.
Oh yeah.
So what is it that's on the docket for the parlor this week or this Friday?
To the best of my knowledge, it's Descartes, I think. His methods, as far as I know.
Okay, so you're going to be prying open modernism, it seems almost. If that's going to be fun. I actually have a book with many aphorisms about modernism, none of which are particularly flattering. Though it's not by someone who's a philosopher by trade, but definitely somebody who has done a lot of philosophizing. It's Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And his book is entitled The Bed of Procrustes. I can't remember what the subtitle was. It was just something about aphorisms. And I have to say they're pretty good. Maybe not quite as good as Nietzsche's. But some of them are zingers. But yes, I would highly caution. I'll use Peterson's video as kind of a stepping stone to advocating an idea that, is ultimately what my little brother wound up doing. My little brother wound up going to college nearly a decade after me. So the times were actually quite different. A lot happened in that particular decade. Due to the nature of institutions of higher learning, especially the ones labeled colleges and universities, specifically universities, basically turning into neo-Marxist cesspools, my little brother decided, though he could have, with his education, attended many more prestigious places, he decided to go to a cheapy community college and do the first 2 years of his degree there, and test out of as many courses of leftist indoctrination, such as English literature, humanities, etc., as possible, because there are in the United States such things as CLEP exams, which are college-level exam preparation, something like that, exams, which basically gives the taker of the test college credit if he passes, so that he can avoid certain classes. And then after getting an associate's degree, which in pre-engineering or whatever it may be, transferring those credits to a large institution where one can generally be anonymous, with big classes, where there's less interpersonal interaction and less risk of getting called up by a leftist, and getting a degree in a subject that teaches real-world skills, such as engineering or medicine or hard sciences, or even to some extent the soft sciences, if you can hold your nose at a lot of the propaganda they're shoving down your throat. And then taking care of these other aspects of education at home, or with level-headed people anywhere in the world, as is definitely getting easier and easier to do in the information age. For example, doing what you and Caleb are doing, or learning math from Paul's online math notes, and then throwing zingers back and forth with Stephen and me, for one instance of an example of something one can do. You going to culinary school, as you said, it might very well be the very best place for, or something equivalent might very well be the best place for an intelligent student-aged man to go. And whereas some people might say, oh, well, it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? High status. It's not as it's not as revered as, say, going to Oxford or an Ivy League school or something, and studying something something at a university level. But if I may be so bold, I don't know what is so with the current state of things. I don't see why the university would be or should be up on a pedestal at all. Indeed, somebody who ideologically is very different from me, Mark Cuban, even acknowledges that universities have inundated their curriculum with crap. And he advocates going to just any old place that'll get you the degree that you want, not holding too much weight on things like what's the name of the university or something.
That reminds me of the conclusion of a discussion I had with one of my teachers about a year ago, which was I can't remember what it was about. It was just such a memorable. It was just such a memorable finish by her side, because like we were discussing something, and I felt we were both at equal terms. It was in front of the entire class, of course, because I like to humiliate and challenge their authority.
It's not at all pursuing truth, but just challenging their authority, right?
Only that. I just do it to piss them off. Her ending argument was like, I got a master's degree from this and this university. Well, I read books.
And I will bet, I don't know if this is fair of me to say, but you probably have more books in your room than she's read in her lifetime.
I don't know. I was taken out and getting a warning for bullying the teacher before I could say anything else, so...
Bullying the teacher, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So the teacher needs to... needs to put herself up on a pedestal of being the authority, as opposed to actually defending whatever claims she might make on a purely reasonable basis.
Basically, yeah.
Sounds like you won.
I think so. It says so on my grading card, at least. What's the exact term? Oh yeah. Being provocative in class is just a permanent thing when people are supposed to hire me. It'll just say I'm provocative. I love that.
Well, there's all sorts of things that can be provoked, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sexual tension can be provoked with that lovely song by Gunther. Oh, you touch my tra-la-la. I mean, that would be provocative, would that not?
Oh, yes. Oh, my. So, yeah. That also reminds me of a comment from my teacher, another teacher who I actually respect, an American, who studied at, I think it was Columbia. And she said, I think she said, you have the most controversial opinions I know of. I think I've never disagreed with you, but you always made me see your point. And I was like, oh, well, thanks.
Okay, so she was capable of holding two ideas in her head, letting them fight out each other and coming to good conclusions.
Oh yeah, she's like the only teacher in that school I actually respect.
Those kinds of people are valuable. Do you have her contact information? Like, stay in touch with her. Seriously, she can write letters of recommendation for you, and perhaps if you just let her know from time to time how you're doing, I know that she'll probably appreciate that.
Yes, I do have her contact information.
Well, good.
Then I'll still try to do that.
Like, if on a quarterly basis you sent her an email or a letter or something, thanking her for being a good teacher, telling her that you respect her, and then giving periodic updates on what it is that you're doing. I know, as someone, I wouldn't call myself a teacher, perhaps as a learning coach, but as somebody who's involved in education, I like knowing that someone in whose life I may have had a small influence, or even if I haven't had an influence at all, I like seeing people do well. And if she's the kind of a person that can rejoice in the good things that happen to others, you can call me a prophet here, but I'm going to think that there's quite a bit of rejoicing that is to be done in terms of the things that you're going to be doing and are currently doing in life.
Well, thanks. That's a lot of faith to put in me.
Well, you don't have to believe me if you don't want to, but in your process of making meaning, you're going to be doing quite a bit. That's all I'm going to say on the matter right now. Let's go to the next video.
Laszlo Polgar, a Hungarian educational psychologist, was one of the earliest advocates that great performers are made, not born. He had argued that dedicated practice in any chosen field could transform any healthy child into a genius. Children have extraordinary potential, and it's up to society to unlock it, he says. The problem is that people for some reason do not believe it. They seem to think that excellence is only open to others, not themselves. Back in 1960s, when Polgar was contemplating his experiment, his idea about talent was considered so absurd that local government official told him to see a psychiatrist to get rid of his delusions. But Laszlo could not be stopped that easily. He realized that the only way to prove his theory was to test it on his own future children. So he started exchanging letters with a number of young ladies in search of a wife. He found a young Ukrainian woman named Clara. Like many at the time, she thought he was crazy, but they agreed to meet. Amazingly enough, she found his arguments irresistible and ended up taking part in his bold experiment. In 1969, Clara gave birth to their first daughter, Susan. Laszlo spent hours trying to decide on the specific area in which Susan would be groomed for excellence. He needed Susan's achievements to be so dramatic that nobody could question their authenticity. This was the only way to convince people that their ideas about innate talent were all wrong. And then it struck him. Chess. Polgar said it was chosen because it was objective. If his child had been trained as an artist or novelist, people could have argued about whether she was really world-class or not. But chess has an objective rating based on performance, so there is no possibility of an argument. Although Laszlo was only a hobby player, he read as much as he could on method of teaching chess. He schooled Susan at home, devoting many hours a day to chess even before her 4th birthday. He did it playfully, making great drama of the game, and over time Susan became hooked. By her 5th birthday, she had accumulated hundreds of hours of dedicated practice. A few months later, Laszlo entered Susan in a local competition. Almost all the girls qualified were twice her age or older, but she won game after game, her final score being 10-0. The fact that such a young girl won the championship was already a sensation, but winning all the games added to people's amazement. They thought she was born with natural talent for chess. Now, this is where the story only begins. In 1974, Clara gave birth to a second daughter, Sophia. Then in 1976 to a third daughter, Judith. Both Sophia and Judith watched their older sister Susan being trained by their father and wanted to get involved, but Laszlo did not want them to start too early. Only when they turned 5 did he start their training. The girls were not forced to play, so it didn't feel like a chore for them. They were actually fascinated by chess and wanted to play. By the time they had reached adolescence, all 3 sisters had accumulated well over 10,000 hours of specialized practice. Let's take a look at how they performed. At the age of 12, Susan became a world champion for girls under 16. Less than 2 years later, she became the top-rated female player in the world. In 1991, she became the first woman player in history to reach the status of Grandmaster, the highest title you can reach in chess. By the end of her career, she had won the World Championship for women on 4 occasions and 5 chess Olympiads, and was the first person in history to win the chess Triple Crown. Sophia won the girls under 14 championship, and like her sister, she would win many gold medals from chess Olympiads and other prestigious championships as well. But her most extraordinary achievement is now known as the Sack of Rome. She stunned the chess world by winning 8 straight games against many of the best grandmasters. She was just 14 at the time. Her performance at the tournament was rated as the 5th greatest in chess history. After many record-breaking victories in her early teens, Judith became the youngest grandmaster ever, male or female in history, at the age of 15. She has been the #1 female chess player in the world for well over a decade. Over the course of her career, she had victories over almost every top player in the world and is universally considered to be the greatest female player of all time. The story of the Polgar sisters provides evidence for Laszlo's theory of dedicated practice, but the public was sure that the sisters' success was a consequence of unique talent. Susan was even described by the local newspaper as a child prodigy. But this is an iceberg illusion. We only see the fruits of labor, but not the hard work behind the curtains. As Laszlo puts it, if they had seen the painfully slow progress, the inch-by-inch improvements, they would not have been so quick to call Susan a prodigy. Also, neither Laszlo nor Clara could have passed on any innate chess ability to their daughters. Laszlo was only a mediocre player, and Clara had demonstrated no chess ability at all. The sisters' success resulted only from their years of intensive work. At the same time, it must be noted that the sisters did not achieve equal levels of success. The middle sister Sophia did not reach the heights of her 2 sisters, and everyone seems to agree that she was the least committed, although she did become the 6th ranked woman in the world. Even Susan said that Sophia was lazy, and Sophia herself agreed that she would give up easier than Judith and never worked as hard as she did. Likewise, everyone seems to agree that Judith, who rose the highest, worked hardest and practiced the most. So here's a question for you. Does everyone have the capacity to become a talented individual? The sisters would say that, yes, any healthy person can become an expert in their own domain if they put in enough dedicated practice. Their own stories have convinced them that their father was right about talent. As Susan put it, "My father believes that innate talent is nothing, that success is 99% hard work." I agree with him. Thanks for watching till the very end. I hope you find the story of the Polgar sisters as fascinating as I did. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to press that like button, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Together we'll become better than yesterday.
So yeah.
Yeah. There are some things that I wholeheartedly agree with, and others that I very much disagree with. But please do share if you have an opinion. Yeah.
Well, I do have somewhat of an opinion, which I guess can be described as I do think most people have the ability to actually perform well above average if they actually just put in fucking training.
Yes.
And by well above average, I mean exceptionally well. But I think in certain fields and, well, certain personal topics, predispositions may have some part to play in how they will fare, but that is obviously dependent on the topic at hand. For example, chess, well, of course, it's highly abstract, but if you have reasonable abstraction ability, you can get pretty far in that just by practicing and practicing and practicing. Which I find like that.
Many people could be a GM in chess if they wanted to.
Oh yeah, they have calculated that it takes about 8 hours of study per day for 10 years to become a grandmaster. So, like people don't need to become it at 10, but that should make it at least possible to be a grandmaster by 50.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me a bit of the book from the father of William Sidis, who's Boris Sidis, who had a similar theory in the 1920s. And, well, he was a bit harder on the training, of course, but as most of the people in this community know, William Sidis turned out to be, or become at least, quite the intelligent guy. And then again, his parents were quite extraordinary in that his mother was wasn't she the first woman in America to get a medical degree, and she also was an educated lawyer, and well, obviously the father was quite highly regarded psychologist, and as far as I remember, he came to the United States at 18 with no prior knowledge of English, and spoke fluently or had gotten a degree at MIT by 21, I think.
Hmm. And so, these theories of, oh, well, I can just, teach my kiddo to play chess, or I could just teach my kiddo to do this. I think that the people that dare even come up with those theories are intelligent enough to be able to see how one could potentially systematize the learning, or at least how a child could potentially go through the learning process easily, which means that they would probably, at least in terms of measurable things, likely have a relatively high IQ, because they would even know we can put the target there way, way over there, as opposed to right here 2 inches in front of our nose. So there has to be some element of foresight and perhaps capacity to run simulations in your head and figure out, well, okay, this could be reasonable, this might not be. Because yes, Susan Polgar was definitely not a dummy. I'm not entirely certain of her IQ figure, but
it has been alleged to be around 170.
Yeah, well, being EG or PG would not surprise me in the least. Any one of them, and of course, you know, having a father that's willing to go to that extent to prove a theory, it says quite a lot about the kind of stock from which she came, or from which all three of them ultimately came. Kind of interesting.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but I would say probably if one were to take an average person, a perfectly average person, and find something that was really stimulating, enjoyable, curiosity provoking, I would say 96th percentile would be pretty reasonable to expect one to reach. 98th percentile would be a little bit of hard work, and you could get there. It's that last little bit, that last 2 to 4% of people that are doing the thing that is really, really difficult to overcome. If you want to be better than them, and that's largely a function of the combination of innate talent and work ethic, because you can have all the talent in the world and still suck at something due to the fact that you don't have as much exposure to the intricacies. You know, sometimes reasoning only gets you so far.
This sort of reminds me on Ethan Hillman's recent belief of Magnus Carlsen being PG.
Oh, certainly. That is okay. When Magnus Carlsen first had any kind of news thing about him, we watched the interview. He was interviewed, I think, by 60 Minutes or something.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I was with my dad, and we just looked at each other, and that we didn't even say anything. And then my dad motions for my mom to come over and says, "Okay, so watch this piece. Here's another PG dude." that was just he didn't even need to. After like 5 seconds of watching an interview.
But I think it sort of shows in his behavior. Like sort of his behavior, because I saw this like he's obviously featured all the time. We're in Norway, or I'm in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like on the news every other week or so. That reminds me, there was actually a headline in our national newspaper: Magnus Carlsen has got a girlfriend.
Oh boy! So the newspapers are taking the job of the tabloids then.
Yeah.
Sneak up behind it with the camera. Quick, get a picture of her.
And,
Sneak up to the bedroom window. Quick, get a picture. No.
But I sort of think his work ethic shows through, because, for example, there was this interview going on our national news channel, where he was meeting this really famous cartoonist who Magnus had been a fan of for about 2 decades by that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even then, he sat on his phone doing chess puzzles. Like, during that. Meeting, like, one of his biggest, well, I guess, celeb crushes in that regard.
Mm-hmm. He, definitely has some Aspian ADD traits, or ADHD traits.
Oh, yeah. You know, I actually met him once, and I support your idea about the eyes, or theory, I guess. Yes, terribly penetrating eyes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and his sister's hot.
Ah, well, that's nice to know. Potential girlfriend material for you?
Well, she's about a decade older than me, so no.
Well, why not? My wife is 3.5 years older than I am. My mom is 6 years older than my dad. Anyhow, moving on from that topic. The girlfriend topic, that is. Unless, of course, you prefer to stay on it.
Oh no.
One thing that I noticed that Magnus's dad did is he ensured, especially when Magnus was little, and by little I'm even referring through teenage years, that all the basic things were taken care of, because he was there focused very intently on chess. Chess this, chess that, chess everything. He was obsessed with chess. If he would not have had structure in his life, if he would not have had food taken care of, if he would not have had transportation, if he would not have had just these basic elements of stability in his life, there is no way he would have been able to accomplish things, because he would have been living in a cesspool. That has to do with the obsessive nature of focusing on one thing. And this actually leads directly into one of my theories about the best thing that parents can do for their children is, of course, giving stimulating activities and allowing them to learn and grow is very important. But having an emotionally stable environment that is safe for children to come home to after doing things is important. And then establishing enough structure and rhythm and progressively giving more and more responsibility is crucially important, so that children learn over the course of their childhood how to take care of those elements of life that are often overlooked but quite necessary to actually be able to perform at a level anywhere near your maximum. You know, proper nutrition, proper hydration, proper sleep, having a reasonably tidy home environment. You know, I prefer controlled chaos. Other people like very, very, very clean. Other people, you know, somewhere in between. All of those different elements were taken care of for him, which allowed him the opportunity to excel in the ways that somebody that didn't come from a household that would have been quite so rich in the resources necessary for stability wouldn't have gotten. So you're moving out in what, 2 months?
Just about.
Okay.
Hopefully.
So, the most important things for you are going to be maintenance of an appropriate amount of routine, because if you do have that routine into which you fit everything else, then that actually allows your creative time, your productive time, your learning time, your reading time, all these other times that matter to you, to be so much more efficient and effective that in a couple hours you would accomplish the same as you would in an entire day if the rest of your life was in disarray. So for whatever it's worth, I highly recommend to you and to any of our other listeners and viewers that establishment of proper habits, little bit by little bit, are integral in having the kind of life you want to have.
That reminds me, I actually have a book that describes the habits of highly successful people.
Once again, something to send to me, and I will throw it up on the in the description.
That also reminds me about Ben Franklin's naked baths.
Mm-hmm.
Naked air baths, that is.
Mm-hmm.
As they were called.
Well, due to the fact that we lost about 15 minutes of stream time due to technical difficulties and my own gross negligence, I think that we'll probably need to skip over a bit of Moby Dick, and yeah, unfortunately, well, quite fortunately, we've been going for 2 hours and 28 minutes. And it would at least be nice to hit some of the finance stuff before. But what are you thinking?
Let's get into it.
All right.
I'm verifiably bad with my own finances.
Ah, well. Saving is a very important thing, but yes, I will then do a bit of screen capturing here, and go to this particular page of the book. Have to there we go. Change the format, and we'll start talking about scarcity and opportunity cost. There's a link in the description. It's from it's a book entitled Economics in the Free Markets, or well, there's the link. It's the Cato link. And you can find the beginning of what we're talking about on page 21. It's Chapter 2, Scarcity and Opportunity Cost. So we begin by talking about scarcity, and then we'll talk about rationing and opportunity cost. So basically, how do people deal with their being, with having their wants being bigger than the means there are to provide for them? Another of the foundational concepts of economics is scarcity. In Thomas Sowell's words, what does scarce mean? It means that people want more than there is. In the words of my textbook, scarcity means there is less of a good freely available from nature than people would like. Sowell again, there has never been enough to satisfy everyone completely. That is what scarcity means. Scarcity is not rareness. Cars are not rare. They're everywhere, but they are scarce nonetheless, because not everyone who wants one has one, and not everyone who wants two has two. Virtually all goods are scarce. In fact, the only good I can think of that is not scarce is air. We breathe in all we want, freely available from nature. We might think that water is not scarce, but even outside drought-stricken areas, clean, drinkable water surely is. To appreciate scarcity and its significance, focus on the scarcity of productive resources. The land, human talent, and capital goods. buildings, machinery, and equipment we require for producing what people want. We have unlimited desires for goods and services, but the land, labor, and capital available to produce them are all limited at any particular time. They are scarce. Accordingly, so are the goods and services we can produce with them. So as a recap, Gylve, how would you define scarcity in economics?
Well, I would just define it as basically, how shall I frame that? Too little to satisfy the need.
Or want. Yes.
Or want, yeah.
All right. Would
I'm
you?
just heading for the can. Sorry. I'm
Okay.
You're asking a question.
Well, I will continue. I will continue then to read this while you're going. This insight is at the heart of economics. Because there are not enough resources with which to produce everything we want at any time, we must decide how to allocate those resources and thereby decide to produce some goods instead of others. We constantly face such trade-offs because if we use resources to produce one thing, we can't use them to produce another instead. How we make those choices, and implicitly who makes them, is what economics is about. As Sowell says, economics is the study of the use of scarce resources which have alternative uses. That is a helpful definition, one to keep in mind throughout this book. So I'm going to say it again. Economics is the study of the use of scarce resources which have alternative uses. So, let's say, for example, there's a piece of land. One could farm the land. One could leave the land as it is. One could build a housing development. Those are three of many options of things that one could do with a piece of land. But if you do one, the area devoted to one cannot be devoted to another. That is just the fact of life. The same thing with a production line. If you have a production line of a factory, machines that can make multiple things, for instance, but then you use them for one purpose, well, that production line is then going to be making whatever you send through one end to the other, and it's not going to be making some other thing, and so on. So, Mr. Thorbeardson, would you care to read the portion on rationing, if you don't have anything to add, about scarcity?
Rationing, yes. I really don't have anything to add most of the time. Reiterating. But yeah, rationing. The next principle follows from the fact of scarcity. Scarcity necessitates rationing. Rationing is the allocation of scarce resources among the myriad possible uses. We can't avoid rationing, but we can choose how to do it. Think of all the ways in which we humans can ration goods. Sadly, we often do it by force. The biggest and strongest just take what they want. We sometimes do it by equal division, in which everyone gets the same share. We can do it by some kind of lottery, in which chance determines who gets what. Some things we ration on a first-come, first-served basis. Sometimes some of us give goods or services to the smartest, e.g. scholarships, or the neediest, e.g. charity. In a free society in which property rights are respected, it's up to the owner of a good or service to decide how it will be rationed, and often private owners do give some of their property away to the deserving or needy. In a free market economy, however, most of the time goods and services are rationed according to buyers' willingness and ability to pay the market price. Goods and resources go to those who will pay that price. The great advantage of this means of rationing the great advantage of this means of rationing is that it tends to get goods and services to the people who value them most, who can put them to the highest valued uses. The tendency is not perfect because sometimes those who value goods most don't have and can borrow enough money to pay the market price. That's the real drawback of rationing by price. That drawback is offset many times over by the way price rationing tends to get goods to where they will do the most good for the real human. Okay, I can see you again.
Okay, that was strange. I think it crashed. Either that or the internet just completely died.
Oh.
So the last sentence was, I think it crashed in the middle of the last sentence. The last sentence was, but that drawback is offset many times over by the way price rationing tends to get goods to where they will do the most good for real human beings. So, that's one of the reasons to save money.
Oh.
It's so you will be able to, well, I'm going to be right back. I have my little object lesson that I keep on bringing to these streams. I'm going to get it again.
Yes, peeps arguing about, or not arguing, I guess, discussing the possibility of increasing one's intelligence. I see both Mr. Stutz and Sanderson going at it.
Ha. I'll be bad.
Oh.
Okay. So we have multiple things here. I have a $20 bill and a €20 bill. And ultimately these bills have value because they are part of a currency which we must use to pay our taxes, depending on which country we are in. Now, what this means, my possessing these, means that somehow I have, or have made, or have stolen, or have been given $20 and €20 of surplus value. Or actually, no, that's completely wrong. Is that I'm given the debt of that value. In other words, someone owes me, whoever I give this to, €20 worth or $20 worth of goods and services. So essentially, the collection of these means that someone, the reason I say someone is because I got this $20 as a gift. I didn't have any cash on me when I was coming back to Finland, and so my parents gave me this $20 just in case I would need to buy something at the airport, so I wouldn't need to pay any kind of fees. So this is a transfer of the indebtedness society has to my parents to me by their own free will. And this is, well, both mine and my wife's, in that we have an agreement that, well, our finances are one and the same. So together, this represents how much society owes us. So collecting more of these essentially means that we have produced more and more and more and more, and can cash in on that production when we spend the fruits of our labor. Now, if we want to increase our means even further, we will spend these on buying things that produce even more. Whereas if we want to consume, we will buy these on things that are consumables or things that depreciate in value. But, saving up until there's something that makes sense to buy is generally a good thing to do. But hanging on to too big of a pile of cash for too long might not be the best idea, because it could be put to some better use in some other investment vehicle if you know what you're doing. But either way, being able to have a stash of money in order to be able to pay market price for something is very, very useful, and I highly recommend having what is colloquially termed an oh shit fund. First, I would say the equivalent of about $1,000 or €1,000, or would that be? What would that be for you, Ylva?
About 10,000 Norwegian kroners.
Okay, so 10,000 kroners, approximately, and then increase that slowly to about 6 months' worth of living expenses, so that if something happens, you would be able to live, and then anything on top of that you can. Well, anything on top of the 1,000 or 10,000 for that matter, you could invest, and then, but still do keep that around in case you decide, oh, I'm going to start a business, I need to quit my job. Then at least you can live for 6 months until you wind up getting your business off the ground, or something. But that's a little bit of a distraction from the point, which is that it's nice to have money around, or something to trade around, so that you can ultimately pay market price for what it is that you do value at any given time, assuming something like that happens to come up. Let's continue with opportunity cost. Ylva, would you mind reading that?
No, I would not.
Okay.
Opportunity cost. A crucial concept bound up with all we have been saying about scarcity is opportunity cost. Let's start with some examples. If you were not reading this passage right now, what's the next best thing you could be doing instead? Whatever that is, its value to you is your opportunity cost of reading this passage. I ask my students what they would have chosen to do had they not come to my class that day. Usually the answer is sleeping. Next most frequent is working. Only in the third place, sadly, is studying. In each case, the value of the particular student, of the sleeping, the working, or the studying she gives up, is her opportunity cost of coming to class. An easy to remember definition of opportunity cost is whatever you give up. A more precise definition focuses not on the thing given up, but on its value. Opportunity cost, then, is the value of the best alternative foregone, which one takes when one takes an action. In a world of scarcity, every choice any of us ever makes has a cost, because when we choose to do A, we cannot do B instead. The cost to a farmer of growing wheat might be the value to him of growing soybeans instead. The cost to Ben & Jerry's of producing a batch of Cherry Garcia ice cream might be the value of producing a batch of Chunky Monkey instead. The cost to a student of going to college might be foregone income and experience from working at a job instead, plus the value to him of all the things he could have purchased with what he spent on tuition. Strictly speaking, actions have costs, but things do not. When you buy a bottle of water for $1.25, strictly speaking, it is not the bottle that has a cost, but your purchase of it. What's the next best thing you could have done with $1.25 and the time it takes you to make the purchase? The value to you of the next best thing is the cost to you of purchasing the water. Notice also that the same action has different costs to different people and to the same person at different times. The reason is that opportunity costs are values of the next best opportunities foregone, and values, as we have seen, are subjective. For example, the cost of studying economics on a Sunday afternoon in the fall will be much higher to a pro football lover who is offered a free ticket to his favorite team's game than it will be to someone who has little else to do that afternoon. Costs vary according to situation. The cost of growing 100 bushels of wheat will be lower to a farmer with excellent soil and adequate rain than it will be to a farmer with poor soil in a dry region. The latter farmer can still produce that much wheat, but he'll have to use additional scarce resources of fertilizer, water, and irrigation equipment to do so. The value of the next best uses of that fertilizer, water, and irrigation equipment, perhaps on the other farms and crops, is the additional opportunity cost of growing wheat on poor, dry soil. Every action has a cost. Nothing is free. Free public education, for example, is not free. It uses up buildings, desks, electricity, teachers' time, and expertise, and other resources. The value of all the other goods and services that could be produced with those resources is the opportunity cost of public education.
Mm-hmm. So what that means is that whoever makes the decision, by definition, values what they have decided more than any of the other alternatives. Why do you think that it? And I'll scroll up here to the appropriate spot. The more precise definition is on the bottom of page 18 or 24 in of the PDF. Opportunity cost then is the value of the best alternative foregone when one takes an action. So it's not only the worst alternative. I mean, like, let's say my sitting in the chair right now talking with you. I mean, a considerably worse alternative could be vaulting over the rail on which the laptop is perched and falling 9 feet, 9, 12 feet, 9, 12 feet down the stairs. Or rather, in the air to hit on the bottom 2 stairs, breaking my back and going to the hospital. That's not particularly, at least to my understanding, a valuable experience, but that is one of my choices. I could break my laptop too. That would be that would be that would be a choice. But there are an awful lot more valuable things to me than the opportunity of chancing death and inflicting terrible pain on myself. So, maybe the opportunity cost would be having breakfast, or sleeping, or working on something else, or going on a bicycle ride. Depending on what my second choice would be if I weren't here having the stream to do right now.
I must be honest and say my second most valuable option instead of sitting here right now would be sleeping.
Ah. Well, that sounds entirely reasonable.
At 6:10 a.m.
Well, we will then quickly conclude this stream with.
Oh no, I didn't do that.
Well, we are narrowing down on 3 hours of streaming uptime, and let's see. Here we are. Huh. That's interesting. A music player stopped playing music.
Oh.
Well, we'll just restart that. And, well, this isn't working. Oh, there we are. Lovely. All right, now going back to what it is that we were talking about. The opportunity cost of education is whatever else we would be doing instead of educating ourselves. But the value of education in the world today, meaning real education, is constantly increasing. And I bring that up because of a nice piece that Mr. Hector Quintanilla wrote, which is what is the single greatest piece of career advice and why? Founder at digitalageeducation.com. Rita was always in charge of me when as a child I visited my father's office. I remember her chasing me down the hallways to prevent me doing any damage. My favorite activity when visiting was to draw at Rita's desk. It was a very unique architect's drafting table, like shown below. Rita was the best mechanical drawer at the office. For years, her only job was to draw all those huge architectural plans. My father designed the building, but Rita's job was to draw with full precision every detail to millimeter. These mechanical drawing tools were always at Rita's desk. There was a French curve. Triangles, scales, drafting tape, compasses, erasers, dividers, pencil pointers, dusting brushes, protractors, pencils, erasing shields, a drawing board, and a T-square. Years went by. Then the day came when Rita was replaced by a young AutoCAD drawer. With the use of a computer and a large format plotter, his productivity easily quadrupled Rita's work. My dad never dismissed Rita, but in a single day she was replaced and never did another architectural drawing again. To answer your question, what's the single greatest piece of career advice? Technology is changing everything and will sooner or later impact every job on Earth. Learn from Rita's story. Make sure you stay relevant as we accelerate change into the digital age. Knowledge, as we talked about last stream, is the most valuable commodity. We have the human spirit and human ingenuity. But if we don't constantly give our ingenuity appropriate up-to-date materials to feed off of, we'll soon find ourselves irrelevant. So while the opportunity cost of education may be high at some point, being able to do all sorts of different things that we might like, thinking in terms of the future, knowing things like economics, knowing generally what the cutting edge of technology is, what can be done. I'd say knowing how to program a computer, knowing how to think for yourself, and ultimately having a good moral framework to guide one's decision making are all very, very important things to fill one's life with. And some of those things will remain the same, whereas others of them will change with time.
That reminds me of Norway's most popular profession.
Which is?
I can't really translate it, but it's like the person who's responsible for engineering, like the process of oil plants and such.
Mm-hmm.
Because like a third of all people going to trade school went in for that profession because you could sit on your ass and make tenfold what I'll make. But the thing was, back in 2016, I think it was, there's a software that basically made it quite redundant to have more than one or two or three people per system. So the oil company started basically firing half the hired people, and now that education is basically the most valueless, I guess. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Worthless education you can get because so many people already have it and have been laid off. So it's such a saturated market.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, a new surge of old people came back to school.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Because the opportunity cost of going to school isn't particularly high. I mean, sitting on your butt and doing nothing isn't a particularly high cost to going and getting an education and hopefully being able to improve your lot in life. Now you are planning on having a restaurant.
I am.
And the plans are, by and large, to my understanding, secret. So obviously, I'm not going to ask you to say anything that you don't want to on stream. But I do have some questions.
Secret, but, I like to keep my names and such a tad secret because I want to keep them for myself. But the plan in itself isn't that secret. I actually made a QR answer about it.
Yes, that's why I bring it up.
So yeah, the plan is basically me getting really, really, really good at my subject, you know, culinary arts, through extensive traveling and personal development, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Then finding myself a big city, because obviously most restaurants never make a profit, and I need to make a profit to not only get a successful restaurant, but also make my restaurant empire, which will make me not need to work after 40. So also develop a relatively innovative marketing plan, and actually finding something to spread the word of mouth, which I'm currently trying to work on, which is part of the secret part of it. And yeah, basically opening a restaurant there with people not necessarily people I feel are extremely good from before that, but at least people I feel like I can teach and bring up to the level I find satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
That is my working plan thus far.
Okay. So, what is your thought about the new robots that people are programming to consistently make high quality food?
I think it's good if you already have the recipe.
So would you consider utilizing it for at least a part of your food prep?
I would. I most certainly would. Of course, it would be a tremendous, and I mean tremendous upgrade to actually have that do all the preparations for the dishes I'll make, because I'll save crazy time, wages, everything basically. So all I see is a big upside to that part, which obviously makes me and my future team, so to speak, be able to focus much more energy, time, and thoughts towards the actual point of it, the tastes, the innovation, That's so if we skip the most time-consuming part of the whole business, then obviously that's only positive for my part.
Well, sounds like a very good potential use of time and resources.
I hope so.
I mean, you're investing in yourself right now, and investing in robotics, in obtaining good robots for doing your bidding. That seems to be a part of your future too. And for those of you that are getting into any field watching this at any point in the future, maybe you'll be watching this after robotics are already a really, really big thing in the production of even things that people generally think are in the domain only of humans now. Remember that this video is taken in the context where restaurants generally have people doing everything. Certainly there are timers, but people are flipping hamburgers, although there are now hamburger flipping machines in existence. People are taking orders, though there are kiosks now getting implemented all over the place where people can go and select and do the ordering process themselves. So a lot of what goes on is crafting the experience to be what you want it to be, and then selling that to people, all the while trying to cut down on the costs of generating said experience. And I have the utmost confidence that you will be able to produce a good culinary experience for the one wishing to enjoy it. I'm not going to say merely the eater, because the eater is also going to be the one who enjoys the ambiance of your place.
Oh, yes.
Or tries to use going to your place as an opportunity to impress a lady or something.
Oh my. Oh, so many thoughts. Right, not thoughts, thoughts. White males. Oh yeah. I hope that'll turn out good. I have a alrighty starting point for now.
Well, good.
So 2 years of work now, and then I can use my surprisingly impressive resume to get a job, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Or just use your impressive resume to get investors.
And that too, but I certainly don't plan on opening this just after I turn 20. Purely for skill reasons.
Ah.
But yeah. Just had my final exam, actually. That turned out surprisingly okay.
Surprisingly okay.
Oh yeah, I was going in there expecting a D. But alas, did better than that.
Well, D's are darn tootin'. F's are fantastic. C's you can do. B's are bad, and A's are awful.
Oh yeah. I guess I got a bad grade then.
Ah, you got a bad grade. Well, you know, you can always try harder than you can do it, and you'll be darn tootin'. You'll work your way all the way up to being fantastic. That's where you want to be.
Oh yeah. Oh. As long as I pass.
Well, yeah, and then when you do enter the workforce for good, I firmly believe that just kind of keeping your eyes and your ears open and doing your own research, staying on top of everything is while actually remaining within the field of interest is the best way to increase your proficiency.
I agree. That actually reminds me of a book I read called Gastrophysics, which is quite interesting.
Gastrophysics.
Oh yeah.
Not astrophysics, but gastrophysics. Okay. Please do tell.
So it's basically about how, like, neuroscience and psychology affect how we enjoy or don't enjoy a restaurant, a dish. For example, the naming of a dish actually has up to 50%, or can actually change up to 50% of buyers just by actually changing it to something trendy.
So pile of poo does not work.
For example, I think the example they had was Chinese red herring or something. Some Chinese fish that sounded apparently not delicate. Then they changed it to exotic Asian seafood sort of thing. Oh, yeah, went up 200%. Damn. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
A good book, actually.
It'll take a few hours to process this stream because it's so long, but eventually all these links in it will show up for you guys. Let's review what all links were there. You had 3 books, I believe, that you were going to link.
Oh yes, I still haven't found the 3rd one, but I'm now sending the 4th one.
Or are you sending them on Discord?
No, WhatsApp.
Oh,
I think
you might help if I actually had my WhatsApp open. I was thinking I haven't seen any WhatsApp messages from from you. Of course, you know, having the actual application open really tends to help matters.
Sometimes.
Ah, and we have our lovely compatriot Stephen here.
Oh, there, yeah.
Oh, we'll see you, David. Oh, yeah, Stephen is busy being an extrovert in the chat. This is great.
I think they're just debating about IQ and crystallized intelligence, really.
Yeah, it seems like it. So all is well. Everything's working just normally. But I'm going to guess that everything is kind of wound down a bit. And I'm sorry for the poor viewership. I'm going to attribute a great deal of it to the fact that I done screwed the fact that wasn't working for the first 15 minutes. But thank you all who took the time to watch. And I hope you will tune in tomorrow, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time through midnight, in which I'll be streaming with Steven. And then our stream after that will be on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And then I will stream with Gylve on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Hopefully.
I'm sorry, on Monday and Tuesday. Hopefully.
Hopefully. Depends on when my father's home. Assuming
his availability works. If not, then I'll either do it by myself or with Steven, depending upon scheduling constraints. But thank you, Gylve, for joining. It was definitely a pleasure, as always, to have you around and to talk with you. And thank you, everyone else who's watched. All right. We will see you all next time. Bye.